Was it a good picture of your earring?
It was not a good picture.
Oh.
I was like this.
I thought it was your earring you were taking a picture of.
All right, let's do the review for our chapter on the book of Romans. Let's look at our questions from last week and go over that. The first one is, who writes the book of Romans and who or whom is it written to?
Paul.
The Apostle Paul writes it.
The Church of the Saints in Rome.
The church at Rome.
At Rome, yes.
The church at Rome, established at Rome. How many years after the Damascus experience, you know that's when Paul was slain on the road to Damascus, blinded. So how many years after that Damascus experience was this book written?
35.
Okay, and why was that even a big deal? I had said 25 to 35, so if you're anywhere in there, it's good. The reason why I wanted to establish the fact it's less important to know exactly how many years, more important to recognize Paul is not a new believer when he writes the book of Romans. And why is that important? Because the establishment of theology grows with Paul as he writes. And hopefully you can see that. One of the things that I plan on doing as we go through the Pauline letters is to help you realize the timeline of when they're written and how how long Paul has been teaching it. The reason for that is as is true with any of us or anyone you ever known who is a teacher or a pastor, as you grow with experience, your theology becomes richer and deeper and more mature. And we see that with Paul. We see that grow in deeper ways. And so as we get to the book of Romans, one of the reasons why everyone loves it so much and enjoys the deep richness of it is because Paul has been a believer and a teacher and an apostle of the Lord for all of these years, and he's been submerged in that. So that's why that particular question is important. All right. What was happening with the church in Rome during this time and what needed to be addressed? Who'd like to answer that rather than have everybody? What was going on in the church of Rome? Yes?
Claudius, the emperor, had kicked out all the Jews. I have something about 5 to 6 years, but yeah. And then the Gentiles and the Jews were fighting amongst themselves. And the Jews returned, and then there was a new emperor, Nero.
Okay, good. So, yes?
Gnosticism?
Gnosticism.
Mm-hmm.
No, not so much. As much as the Hellenistic views of the would go on. We're going to see that even more in today in Corinth. But yeah.
I thought too that there was a conflict over how much the law should apply to each person.
Sure.
Because the Jews had, come from the law, and the Gentiles hadn't had those same kinds of restrictions before they came to Christ, and then they were told by Paul and others who were helping them, like Peter in Acts 15, that they didn't need to keep all the law.
Oh.
And so there continued to be conflict between the two groups about how much of the law do you have to keep.
Exactly. And that's an unfolding thing in Paul's theology too that we see. Because the misconception, I think, a lot of times in the writings is because Paul is so very clear to his audience of the Gentiles, so very clear that they are under no obligation to follow the law. Why? Because the law was...
Jesus fulfilled it.
Well, no, because the law was never to the Gentiles.
True.
It was never a mandatory for the Gentiles at all.
Right.
And so the Gentiles don't have an Abrahamic covenant
Right.
with God. And so all of the things that happened with the with the Jews in the Old Testament, as we go into the Gospels, we see that they were still proselytized. In order to become Jewish, you had to follow the law and all the things that go with that. So this division of the Gentiles coming in without any of that stuff is a brand new thing. To come into this thing that is predominantly Jewish in the early stages, the first 15, 20 years particularly, predominantly Jewish, a sect of Judaism, and to have the Gentiles come in without having to be proselytes or convert was an incredible thing. And so the confusion lies in there is, what about the Jews? So they come in and they still want to continue on with a great deal of what it is they're doing. They want to continue on with the feasts. They want to continue on with much of their cultural aspect. They want to continue on with all of those things that make their community Jewish. The habits that they have in prayer and worship and all of those things. Predominantly things they've seen in temple worship or synagogue worship. So very much a Jewish flavor in all of that. What we have to be clear about is Paul never tells them they cannot do that stuff. Never tells the Jews that they cannot do that stuff. What he tells them is that stuff was never going to save you, ever. Even back in the day when you were obeying it, it was not saving you. It was simply allowing you to have a relationship with the Lord, even regardless of your sin. So the law never saved. It was a tutor to show that you can't do it. You can't do it on your own. You can't save yourself no matter how good you are. Because out of those 613 laws, you're going to mess up. And if you mess up with one, you've messed up with all of them. And so then you're lost. What do? Well, back in the day, it was animal sacrifice to atone for that and cover that so that they could continue on with a relationship. So Paul is just very clearly letting them know that was never going to save you, and it's not going to save you now. So the following of that is predominantly conscience. If you eat and you think it's wrong to eat that, then don't eat it. If you do something and you think that it's wrong to do that, don't do it. We also have an obligation to follow the moral laws of don't murder and don't commit adultery and all of those type of things. And so this merging together of a group who thought that obeying the law made them holy and made them, that was what saved them, with a group of people that have no background with the law whatsoever, and Paul standing in the middle going, we're all the same now, there's a lot to be worked through. And so as you had mentioned, the Jews had been expelled out for 5 or 6 years, that's why that's in your notes, and then they come back in to Rome, and all of a sudden all the Jewish stuff is gone. All their Jewish traditions and the way that they did things is gone, and now the Gentiles have established a new tradition and new habits and a new way of doing things. And the Jews come back in and say, what's going on? You guys are doing it wrong. So that's where the argument then comes up that Paul has to get in the middle of in this book, and we spent so much time last week talking about the fact that he tells them we're all on the same level playing field. No one's up here and no one's down here. And that's a difficult lesson, even 30 years, 35 years after the church has been established. That's still difficult for them. All right, every chapter addresses something in particular, and that's the way we sort of looked at the book of Romans. We went over each chapter. Look at the first one. Who is guilty of grievous sin? Everyone. All of us are guilty of grievous sin. There is no one, even the most righteous, who is not guilty of sin. The next one, chapter 3. How is righteousness attained?
Faith in Jesus Christ.
Okay, only, not through the law, not through the works that you're going to be doing, not through any of that. It is attained only through Jesus Christ. And the reason for that is because it is his righteousness that makes us holy. Not anything we attain on our own, but his righteousness that makes us holy. So it's only through that. Chapter 5, to be justified, and we talked about that simply a good way to remember, just as if it never happened. So to be justified is a work of God alone. What did Paul tell them must precede that justification?
Faith.
Okay, true faith. Again, once again, this chapter, this book, this letter is all about faith and what it means to your salvation. Chapter 7, released from the law but bound to
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. Chapter 8, what allows us to be called children of God? Okay. Those who are led by the Spirit of God. That's what allows us to be called children of God. That's one of the verses in chapter 8. Chapter 9, why did God choose Israel as his chosen nation?
No reason. He
No
chose
reason.
randomly.
It was his
The
sovereign.
ancestry.
Sovereign is the word I'm looking for there.
Sovereign choice.
It's his sovereign choice. So while we say no reason or random, actually in God's plan, that may not be true. There may be a very specific reason and a very specific plan in choosing Israel, but it's in the mind of God, not in the people. In other words, Israel is not a more intelligent race, they're not a more beautiful race, they're not a more godly race, they're not a more perfect race, anything that you can throw in there. They're not. And they show that in every book of the Old Testament as we go through that. But that's not why God chose them. God chose them because God wanted to choose them. That's really the sovereign choice of God. Why did God choose Peter or Paul or Judas? Or why did God choose any of the men that he uses to bring amazing things through? Why did he choose Samson? Why Gideon? Why David? You know, I mean, we could just go on and on and on and on. There's really no reason why God chooses these people. It's that God chooses these people because he wants to choose these people, and he creates in them the people that he wants to accomplish his plan and purpose. Why would that be a comfort to us? Why would he choose Kathy Jolly? Why would he choose Patty Smith? Why would he choose Jackie Goldberg? Why? Why? Are we beautiful and intelligent and righteous and holy and amazing and wonderful? No. He chooses us because it's his sovereign choice to choose us and work his plan through us. Through us. 11, did Israel's rejection of the Messiah and the gospel cause God to cease loving them?
No.
Okay, that's the right answer, so now explain.
I have stretched out my hands to a unstanding, self-righteous, undisciplined, disobedient, ugly people.
Isn't that just the most beautiful verse? Can't you just picture that all day long? I just wait, I wait. I hold out my hands to a disobedient people. Is it any different for us? All day long I wait. I hold out my hands. I give you the opportunity until your dying breath. Until your dying breath, it is my one purpose to seek redemption for you, my child.
And he made covenants, and God doesn't break his promises.
Absolutely. They're irrevocable is the word that's used, isn't it? He cannot take them back. And so the people that he foreknew, the nation of Israel, he chooses them, we've already talked about it, based on his own sovereign grace, right? Not on their merit, but on their grace. We see the perfect example of that for the nation of Israel start with the founder of the nation of Israel, which is Abraham. When God says, I am going to create a people from you. Why does he choose Abraham? Is Abraham incredibly handsome? Brilliant? Amazing?
He had faith.
He had faith, and God counted that as righteousness, right? And so in his sovereign will, he chooses one man, and he says, even though you're going to call your sister, your wife your sister, and even though you're going to do all kinds of strange things, Abraham, I love you. And regardless of what you do, I am always on your side. And I am always going to have your back. And I am always going to bless you, and I am going to curse the people who come against you. That's a covenant. That is a covenant. And with God, it's unbreakable. Well, guess what? We have a covenant too. The new covenant. Bought with the blood of Jesus. It's the same thing. I am going to be for you, Suzanne. I'm going to be for you. And I am never going to turn my back on you. And I am going to bless you with all the blessings that I have. And I am going to come against those who come against you. And it doesn't matter what you do. can turn your back and walk away, and I'll still reach out my hand and pull you back towards me, because you're mine, and I've called you. It's my sovereign will.
If we'd cooperate better, we might not have to wander 40 years in the wilderness.
Isn't that the truth? Oh my goodness, that's so true. All right, and then number 12, or chapter 12, how should we compare our spiritual gifts with one another? Trick question. Trick question. How should we compare our gifts?
We all have
Don't
special gifts.
compare.
Don't compare your gifts, because generally speaking, for the majority of people, you're going to feel like you come out lacking. That's just kind of what we do. There are a few people who think that they come out on the top. That's a whole different problem. But for the most part, we if we're not careful, we always feel like we're lacking in something. I wish I had that gift. I wish I could do that. I wish that I could do this or that or the other. And God says every single gift is incredibly important, and we can't do without any of them. Any of them. Any gift that you have that you're not using, we need it. So bring it, use it, accomplish it. All right, chapter 13. This is the one no one liked. How do we respond as believers to the governing authority?
Submit.
All right, submit. And what if we don't like how they govern?
Still have to pay your taxes and give allegiance.
And pay your taxes and pay your allegiance and give your respect. And what's the one thing that we owe them besides those things?
Prayer.
Prayer. I just wonder myself sometimes how every time an ugly comment or an ugly thought came up about someone, whether it's a school board or a mayor or a senator or anyone in any sort of authority over our lives, if we got upset and angry, if we stopped and purposely said, God, we just ask your blessing to fall upon that person right now. We just ask that you would lead them and that you would send good people to them to guide them, that you would whisper in their ear, that you would bring wisdom to the decisions that they make that benefit us. Lord, we just ask that for this person. If every time we said, we did that prayer, could we change the world? We can make a difference. But you know what? We don't use that. You know why we don't use that? Because we're stubborn people. We're stubborn people who think that what we want is more important than what God has planned for us. And it is a day-to-day battle that we fight. Because the minute we put our trust and our faith in Him and His plans for our families, and for our town and our community and for our nation, the minute in the world, the minute we put our trust in that, we can let go of that anger because it's not about us. And it certainly, ladies, doesn't depend on us. We don't really bring much to the picture because this is God's plan and purpose. And our job as ambassadors is to represent Him and to stand in the gap as He accomplishes His purpose. Maybe that's something that I can just encourage you to think about this week. Try it this week. If you're listening to the news or reading the paper or talking to someone and you find yourself bubbling up with some anxiety or anger, stop. And whoever it is that you're upset with at that time, even if it's someone in your family, or stop and pray for that person and mean it. Don't just say the words, mean it. And you know what? God can do great things with that. I promise you that, because that's the kind of God that we serve. All right, chapters 14 and 15, we should stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, we must encourage one another. Do we do a lot of that? Some people do. Some people are really good encouragers. Other people think it but don't say it. You know what? It's the saying it that really does the good. If you see something and you're thinking to yourself, boy, she is so good when she does that. that means so much to me when I hear that or see that, what she does, and you never say it, then the blessing of encouragement doesn't fall upon that person. So maybe if you're an encourager who keeps it all inside, maybe what we need to practice doing is letting that go. And for those of you who are awesome and amazing encouragers, don't stop, because as things tend to get worse and worse, we need encouragers. That is a gifting that we desperately need, because there are a ton of people willing to tear down. That is easy. Encouragement, wow, that's a gifting. If that's what God has given you, please dust it off and start using it. All right, that's it on that one.
Stop and start your camera.
Mhm.